Seraphine Voss had learned, very early, that rooms full of powerful men were the most dangerous rooms in the world. Not because of the weapons they carried, because of the words they used to decide what a woman was worth. She stood at the entrance of the grand hall, with her chin level and her hands still at her sides. The doors were tall enough to make any person feel small. She suspected that was the point. 12 lords sat behind a long stone table, old men with old blood and older opinions. They looked at her the way farmers looked at land, calculating, impersonal, already thinking about what they could build on it. She had prepared for this. She had been preparing for 3 years, since the day her father's house fell, and she became a name on a list of political arrangements, a body to broker peace, a signature without a voice. She walked forward. The marble was cold even through the soles of her shoes. Each step echoed. None of the lords spoke. They were waiting for someone more important to speak first. That someone entered from a door on the left. She felt it before she saw him. Something locked inside her chest. Not a flutter, not warmth. Something older and more absolute than either of those things. A door she had not known existed, closing shut with a sound she felt in her teeth. She had been told the mate bond was a myth, a story told to young girls to make obedience feel like destiny. She had believed that. She had built her entire sense of self on believing it. King Calum Drax crossed the threshold of the grand hall. He was tall and dressed in black, and he moved through the room the way cold weather moves. Everywhere at once, impossible to ignore. His face was not cruel, it was simply closed. Every feature arranged with the deliberate blankness of a man who had decided long ago that expression was a vulnerability. His eyes found her face before she had taken a second step. He already knew. She understood that immediately. He had felt it too, and his face, for exactly 1 second, showed her something real, something old and tired and sorry. Then it closed again. He walked to his seat at the head of the stone table. He sat. He folded his hands. He looked at the 12 lords and he said, in a voice that did not shake, "I do not accept this bond. It is void." 7 words. The hall did not breathe. Seraphine did not move. She found a point on the far wall, a crack in the stone, thin as a thread, and she looked at it. She breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. She located the thing that had locked inside her chest, and she folded it, carefully, the way you fold a letter you will never send, and she placed it somewhere small, and closed the drawer. She would not give them her face. Not today. Not in this room. None of the 12 lords looked at her with sympathy. Sympathy was not a resource available in this hall. 2 of them looked entertained. 1 was writing something. Most were simply watching Calum, waiting to follow his direction like compass needles following north. The silence stretched. Then there was movement at the far end of the table. A man stood. He had not been among the 12 lords. He had been seated to the side, slightly apart, which she now understood was because he was not beneath Calum in this room. He was beside him, an equal. King Aaron Solnay of the Eastern Reach. He was not dressed in black. He wore deep gray, simple, and he had the kind of face that took a moment to fully arrive, not immediately striking, but the longer you looked, the more there was. Dark eyes that moved slowly and saw everything. A stillness about him that was nothing like Juan's closed-off blankness. Where Calum was a locked door, Iran was a room that had simply chosen not to advertise its contents. He did not ask permission. He did not address the council. He did not look at Calum. He walked across the marble floor and stopped in front of Seraphine. He was close enough that she could see the exact moment he decided something. He said, quietly enough that only she could hear it fully, "Then she is not spoken for." It was not a question. It was an observation. He was checking his understanding of the facts, the way a careful man confirms a calculation before he acts on it. She said nothing. Her heart was doing something complicated. He looked at her then, fully looked at her, not the way the lords had looked at her, not the way even Calum had looked at her. He looked at her, the way you look at something you want to understand. He said, "I want to mark you. Tell me no, and I will sit back down." 1 breath. 2. She thought about the folded letter in the closed drawer. She thought about 7 words spoken by a man who had made a decision about her life before she entered the room. She thought about 3 years of being a name on a list. She did not say no. Iran reached up and moved the collar of her dress aside, just slightly, with the careful hands of someone who understood that permission was not a formality. He marked her. The hall erupted. She heard it distantly, chairs scraping, voices rising, one lord actually standing up so fast he knocked his cup from the table. She did not look at them. She was looking at Aaron's face, which was calm and certain, and gave her, for the first time since she walked through those doors, the impression that someone in this building had thought about what she might actually need. She looked at Calum. He had not moved. His hands were still folded on the table. His face was still closed, but something behind his eyes was burning, contained and silent, the way a fire burns inside a sealed room, visible through the windows, consuming everything, perfectly quiet from the outside. She looked away first. Not because she was afraid, because she had already given him enough. The Eastern Reach was nothing like what she had expected. She had expected cold, distance, the particular cruelty of a man who had claimed something he did not actually want. She had prepared herself for that too, the way she had prepared for the council, quietly, thoroughly, without letting it show. What she got instead was a room with 3 windows and morning light, and a small table with her name on a card that said, "Advisor to the Crown." Not mate. Not consort. Not any of the words that meant decoration. Advisor. She stood in the doorway of that room for a long time. Aaron came to find her that first evening. He knocked before entering, which was not a thing kings were required to do. He sat across from her at the small table, and he told her, without preamble, that she was free to leave whenever she wanted, that the mark did not bind her physically, that if she chose to return to what remained of her father's territory, he would arrange it and speak no word against her. She studied him. Why did you do it? He considered the question seriously. Because Calum was wrong, and the council was watching, and you were standing in the middle of it, with a face like someone who had decided not to let any of them see her break. He paused. I have spent many years watching people make decisions about other people's lives, in rooms the other person was never invited into. I am tired of it. That is a reason to be angry, she said, not a reason to mark a stranger. No, he agreed. The other reason is that I looked at you, and I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time. He said it plainly, without apology, without performing it. I'm not asking you to do anything about that. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the honest reason. She did not know what to do with a man who told the truth without dressing it up. She found out, over the following weeks, that this was simply how he was. He gave her access to every document she requested. He included her in meetings where her presence complicated things politically, and did not apologize for including her. When lords from his own council pushed back on her presence, he said, "She stays," and moved on, not as a performance, as a fact. She was waiting for the cost. There was always a cost. It did not come. This was, she discovered, significantly harder to process than cruelty would have been. Cruelty she understood. Cruelty had a logic and a shape, and you could build walls against it. Kindness that asked for nothing in return had no shape, and she did not know where to put her hands. Calum came to the Eastern Reach 6 weeks later. Council business. Territorial negotiation. A dispute about a river border that had been argued over for 60 years, and would probably be argued over for 60 more. He had no choice but to come, and she had no choice but to be present, because she now held a title that gave her a chair at exactly these tables. She sat across from him. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the grand hall, like a man holding something underwater, using all his strength to keep it from the surface. She did not look away. She had spent 6 weeks building something in herself that was quieter and stronger than what she had walked into that hall with. She was not angry at him anymore, not exactly. Anger requires a kind of hope underneath it, the belief that the person could have done differently. She was not sure yet what she believed. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the lords filed out. Aaron spoke quietly to his secretary near the door. Calum did not leave. He stood at the window, his back to her. I had a reason, he said. I know, she said. He turned. That seemed to surprise him. You know. You felt the bond in that hall the same as I did. You are not a small man in a small situation. You do not make permanent public decisions carelessly. You refused me in front of 12 lords, and then sat perfectly still while another king marked me. She kept her voice level. That is not cruelty. That is someone who made a calculation and decided I would be safer outside his reach than inside it. He was very quiet. Yes. There is a prophecy, she said. Another pause. Longer. Yes. About my bloodline. Yes. And you decided, she said, that the correct response was to remove me from the equation without telling me I was in one. He looked at her. The burning behind his eyes was closer to the surface now, not as well contained. I was trying to protect you. I know, she said again. And then, because she was done being folded and placed in drawers, that is the problem. She walked out. She did not slam the door. She closed it gently, which she understood was worse. Aaron was on the balcony when she found him. He had a habit of standing outside when the negotiations became circular, looking out over the city with the expression of a man doing arithmetic. She stood beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. He told you, Aaron said. Not a question. Parts of it. He's been carrying that prophecy for 15 years. He said it without heat, as information. 3 people who mattered to him. Gone. One after another. He stopped letting things matter after the third. She looked at the city below, the lights coming on as the evening settled, small and domestic and indifferent to kings. You knew. I suspected. I confirmed it about a week ago. And you marked me anyway. I marked you before I confirmed it. He glanced at her. I want to be clear about the order of events. I didn't mark you to protect you from a prophecy. I marked you because I looked at you in that hall, and something in me said, there she is. In a way, nothing has said anything to me in a very long time. He paused. The prophecy is real, and it concerns me, and I am working on it. But it wasn't the reason. She turned to look at him fully. You are a very unusual king. I've been told. It wasn't a compliment, exactly. I know. He almost smiled. I'll take it anyway. She spent the next month in the records archive. Not hiding. Working. She had access now. Real access. The kind that came with a title and a seat, and a king who said she stays without apology. She used it. She pulled documents from 3 centuries of council archives, letters, land records, a series of prophecies that had been classified and filed under a heading so dry and administrative that no one had looked at them in 40 years. She built a case. She was not a soldier. She was not a political strategist. She was a woman with a methodical mind and 3 years of experience being treated as a background detail, which meant she had spent 3 years watching everything happen in the foreground while everyone forgot she was watching. She knew things. She assembled them. The council convened again 2 months after the marking. Seraphine walked in first. Not behind Aaron. Not beside him. First. She placed her documents on the stone table. 300 years of evidence, organized and cross-referenced. The conspiracy laid out simply enough that even a lord who did not want to understand it could not avoid doing so. She stood at the head of the table that Calum usually occupied, and she presented every piece, calmly and without theater, for 90 minutes. The 12 lords who had looked at her like furniture were very still. When she finished, the room was silent. Calum was looking at her from across the table, not with the burning, contained expression she had memorized. Something else. Something that did not have a name, but sat in his eyes like the moment before rain, pressurized, waiting, taking up all the available space. Iran to her right said nothing. He had read the documents already. He had offered suggestions, twice, which she had considered and declined to use. He had accepted this without comment, which still surprised her. The eldest lord cleared his throat. This changes a great deal. Yes, she said, it does. She gathered her papers. She walked to the door. She held it open and looked back once at the room full of old blood and older power, at the 2 kings who had each, in their own way, made decisions about what she was and what she needed. She thought about the folded letter in the closed drawer. She opened the drawer. She left it empty. That evening, the 3 of them stood on the balcony of the Eastern Reach Palace. The city below was lit up, small and warm, and entirely unaware of what had shifted in the rooms above it. The air was cool. Nobody spoke. Caleb stood on her left, Aaron on her right. The space between all three of them held something that had not been named, and would not be named tonight. Seraphine looked out at the city and felt, for the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, that the silence around her was not something she needed to brace against. It was simply space. Room to think. Room to feel. Room to eventually decide what she wanted, in her own time, in her own words, without a single person in the room telling her what the answer should be. She was in no hurry. For the first time in her life, neither was anyone else.